I generally don't use the PowerPoint because many a times neither I have the power nor the points. Now both are lacking this time. Neither I am having the power nor points, so therefore I resort to PowerPoint this time and remain very serious that this should be there visible. That means I am gradually losing the grounds. So having said so, what I try to do, I try to make a general exposition now how the entire trajectory from a sustainable development to sustainable development goes. I try to read between the lines along with the major policy that's being part and parcel of the entire global academia, research, policy, and people. Now, in 1949, the US President assumed the office. His name is Truman. He took office and he made a statement. I am quoting that particular statement. We must embark on a bold new programs for making the benefits of our scientific advances and industrial progress available for the improvement and growth of underdeveloped area. I am reading the quotations or whatever being quoted, what have been stated by the then US President Truman in 1949. He told that we must embark in a bold new programs for making the benefits of our scientific advances and industrial progresses available for the improvement and growth of underdeveloped area. Now, this growth of underdeveloped area, before that, any academia or any kind of a literature or research paper, underdeveloped area, this particular word was not in lexicon, not heard of. So that means in this particular statement might be very pious, very noble, but at the end of the day, the entire Latin American countries, the African countries, the Central Asia, entire Southeast Asia, including our own country, we have been quote unquote tagged as underdeveloped region. So today we are discussing the global South. So the journey, psychologically, instrumentally, power structurally, initiated by the US President in 1949. And as a consequence, the entire population, ছাত্রছাত্রীরা আমি জানি বাংলায় বললে তোমাদের শুনতে এত আগ্রহ হবে, তবে তোমাদের যদি আগ্রহ থাকবে না আমি জানি, একদম এগুলো একটা মিষ্টি কথা নয়, কিন্তু তোমরা যদি কথা বলতে চাও তোমরা বাইরে আড্ডা দাও, কোনো ক্ষতি নেই, কিন্তু আমি কিছুক্ষণ ইংরেজিতে বলবো তারপরে বাংলায় বলবো। হ্যাঁ, তোমাদের ঘুম পেলে ঘুমো, কথা বলো না, একটু কষ্ট হবে আমার। So, East Asian, African and Latin American countries became the underdeveloped region, quote unquote. And this has many multiple ramifications also. Because if you look the major events, historical events, 1780 or the entire 18th century industrial revolutions, 1776 American War of Independence, 1789 the French Revolution, which is based on liberty, equality and fraternity, which is very strong. The liberal thought that we talk about, we discuss, is basically is the outcome of the Renaissance and the French Revolution. That's a very strong ramifications in the psychological aspect of the entire universe. But nonetheless, the ascendancy of the West, it happened because the East Asian, African and Latin American countries became the colonies of the West. And plundering of the resources, natural resources, human resources, all kinds of resources that actually ensure the growth, so-called economic growth and development of the West. So therefore, when we can bringing back the focus to the South Asia, global South, then this historical reality are still a reality today that needs to be looked at, that needs to be that shouldn't be discarded at any stretch of imagination. All of us, we are part of that particular victimization, historical victimizations. Now, up till 1960, আমি কি কিছু বাংলাতে ইয়ে করলে সুবিধা না ইংরেজি বলবো up till 1960 the entire development discourse what we call about development means industrialization, development means urbanization, development means international trade or free trade. These are the major attributes, and that also being tagged with modernity, that also being tagged with nation state, concept of nation state. So nation state, development and modernity, it got us some kind of linear relationship. And we hardly challenge this linear relationship, rather we try to accept this linear relationship as sacrosanct. And that is why our research agenda and our textbook that also maintain that kind of linearity. The question is that when environment at all become part of the thought process or the major propagator of major trendsetter of the development agenda, that is Europe and US mostly. It got long back, it is during 1960s it happened. During 1960s, so these would be the entire trajectory that would be covered in my discussion. So just events that audit the Western world. You can look at the slide, you can read the slide, you can understand. Now, what is that? Now see, these are the events actually made the entire Western world conscious about the environment. Before that, it's something like that resources, be it renewable or be it non-renewable, can be utilized unabatably for the industrial growth, which is synonym to the economic growth, which is synonym to the economic development, and which is synonym to the progress, and which is synonym or rather go to the so-called capitalist development idea or philosophy. So the capitalist development philosophy is solely based on this particular which you call utilitarian concept, where more is made here, so more can be achieved through technological advancement as well as industrial process. We have reached to a situation where artificial intelligence is actually dictating or governing or setting the trend of the further technological intervention, innovation, as well as the production process globally and many other areas too. Now, if you look at the slide that Los Angeles smog in 1960s basically happened in Sweden, acid rain, and therefore up to 1960 only 150 articles were published in New York Times, and within a 1 year time, that is in the year 1970, 1700 articles were published. The way today you have the undergraduate students, they come out with posters, they come out with photography. If you go 10 years back, this kind of exercise were not there. So it shows that environmental consciousness is getting into your psyche. That is why the number has increased. Similar thing happened to the West. So 1 year 1700 articles were published. That shows that they become very concerned about the issues of the environment. Now in the year 1969, the article Tragedy of Commons that was published in the Nature Journal by Garrett Hardin. Now what is the tragedy of commons? Possibly many of the few lectures I have told here also, just let me reiterate it. Tragedy of commons means if there is a common grazing land, that which all of us are surviving on dairy cattle. So my well-being is depending upon that how many healthy cattle I am having. So therefore, to ensure the better well-being of my cattle, which will ensure my well-being, is at the end of the day that grazing land will be overexploited, and at the end of the day that plot will be disappeared, that grazing land will be disappeared. That means that common property which is used by everyone will ensure the complete degradation of the environment that is the crux of the tragedy of the commons. And the Western world accepted it. And they took it very seriously, the word common property. Because they believe in private property, they don't believe in common property. And as a consequence, in June 1972, UN Conference on the Human Environment in Stockholm, what is the outcome? In this particular conference, the environment and development, that means development understood the importance of environment and some kind of marriage between development and environment took place. বিবাহ সম্পন্ন হইল। And then the Club of Rome published that is book, The Limit to Growth. And this limit to growth is an international group, Club of Rome, a businessman, statesman, scientist, and team of experts, mostly from US and many other countries. And they used a dynamic theory and a computer model called World 3. And they came out with 12 possibilities. Now this is a simulation process. Computer simulation process, I am not going into detail, but very simple way to make you understand. Let's say for example, 2x plus 3y is equal to 4, 3x plus 7y is equal to 8. You can solve the equation because there are two unknown and two equations. We can get the value of x and y. But if there are n number of variables, we cannot get a unique value. And in that period, if you have to come out with the solution, then we should take recourse of the simulation process. That is ideally the meaning of simulation is all about. So they did it and come out with 12 scenarios of different possible patterns. Possible patterns of what? Now they understood that population is growing exponentially, that is 2, 4, 8, 16, 22, in that way. Resource use, the exploitation of resources is also growing exponentially. Use of resources, the rule and but industrial growth, food production, these are growing linearly. That means 2, 4, 6, 12 in that way. And the pollution is also increasing exponentially. 2, 4, 8, 16, 22. You can understand the scenario that may emerge. So if you take land, air, water, all got seriously been affected. And the recourse is simple, that we try to resolve the entire thing through technology. So technology on the one hand, which is mostly driven by the energy, light জ্বলছে, fan জ্বলছে, যা কিছু হচ্ছে, energy. So the civilizations and energy that go hand in hand. So without energy, civilization didn't grow, cannot think of, even today itself. And we also cannot think of. So these are going hand in hand. And this is nothing but the outcome of the technology and the type of technology that's been developed. So as a consequence, what happened? Finally, that the ecological footprint, the last point, that is ecological footprint exceeds the carrying capacity of the earth. Next slide. So briefly, tell me that what is the meaning of ecological footprint? Ecological footprint means number of earth required to provide the resources used by humanity and absorb the emission each year. That is the ecological footprint. And carrying capacity of earth, the human demand is compared with the availability and supply of one planet of earth. That means if there is a planet Earth, what is our requirement and how much the Earth is supplying or compensating the ecological footprint. The fact says between 1960 to 2010, 1.7 planet Earth we have already consumed. That means one planet Earth already got exhausted in year 2010. Looking back, in 1983, World Commission on Environment and Development of Publications of Brundtland Report under the who was Norway's Prime Minister a couple of times, J. Schuyler. And the name of that report, it was published in 1987, called the Our Common Future. It was published. What is the crux of this Brundtland report? Most of the environmentalists, they will say that it actually consolidated the policy across the globe to ensure sustainability of the earth. Certainly it is so. But since I am reading between the lines, quote unquote, it was written that it is the poor people, it is the poverty, reduces people's capacity to use resources sustainably, and as a consequence, the environmental degradations, desertifications, floods, or unbalance. That means the environmental crisis on the one hand straightway linked with the common property at the first instance, and secondly, entire poverty-ridden people have been identified as a major agents of environmental crisis. And what is the outcome of that? So the outcome is that entire Central Asia, South, Latin American countries, the African countries, and the entire Asian subcontinent, where the majority of the poor people live and survive, they became they have been made directly responsible for the environmental degradations. And still, that line hasn't been, because most of the countries, we accepted that. So, with these, based on this Brundtland report, 1992, the World Bank came out with the definitions of sustainable development. We reached to the sustainable development goals. Now, sustainable development, as all of these become a cliche. It's an intergenerational equity. That means we should leave a better world for our future generations. Yes, certainly the effort the worldwide made, I am not ignoring that one. But quote unquote, it identified poor people as the major agent of environmental degradations, and entire traditional knowledge and traditional way of life has completely been ignored, and rather indirectly or directly identified those communities and people responsible for the environmental degradations. So in September 2000, UN Millennium Summit, following the Special Millennium Assembly in 1997, possibly Kofi Annan was the UN General Secretary, was announced the Millennium Development Goal, and that is, a target has been set in 2015 that will be achieved. Now these are the Millennium Development Goals. Actually, the type of exuberance after this completing a millennium, the festive mood diluted the entire charter of this particular mandate. And you can eradicate extreme poverty and hunger, to achieve universal primary education, to promote gender equality and empower women, to reduce child mortality, improve material health, combat HIV and AIDS, malaria and other diseases, to ensure environmental sustainability, to develop a global partnership for development. All the goals I'm not taking that across the world. We are working and we got a positive result. There is no doubt about that. But the time period that's been setting is too less, too little, and too less foresighted. But certainly some progress in some regions have certainly been made, and that become part of study. So in 2030, Agenda for Sustainable Development adopted by all United Nations members possibly 190 members, if I am not mistaken, in 2015. And that actually paved the way for 17 Sustainable Development Goals with 169 sub-parameters. The aim of this global goal, it has been written, peace and prosperity for people and planet, while tackling the climate change and working to preserve oceans and forests. The SDGs highlight the connection between the environmental, social, economic aspect of sustainable development. I will try to bring your attention to this, the environmental, social and economic aspect. If we look the entire journey to date, the society and the environment remain a complete disconnect. Point number one. Environment and economy remain mutually exclusive for over 1,000 years. And society and societal issues were never been taken into consideration in the major development agenda. So therefore, if I have to understand the 17 SDGs, what is it? This there are 17 sustainable development goals have been mentioned. Now several things are zero poverty, zero hunger, income like equality, be it income or be it gender, then clean air, clean water, governance, everything has been taken into consideration. I try to make you understand one thing. When we look from the economic perspective, we look at the production and production related technologies, most of the cases. And the outcome of that is the income, as it is at the affluence level. That is the grand narrative, the grand ideas. Now the society is not homogeneous. The issues, social issues are not homogeneous. They are absolutely heterogeneous. Technology might be homogeneous. And people, they survive on production, whatever be the type of production, whatever the type process of production, whatever be the technology that is being used, they remain at the top. So if there is a disconnect between these two, then your economic problem will fail to resolve the social problem, socio-economic problem, socio-cultural problem, socio-political problem. Unfortunately, the Western world took so many years, right from industrialization to 2015, to understand that society and social variables do have considerable importance to understand the economy and the environment. So that means, in one way, it is a very long time that has been taken by the most erudite group of people likely to stay in the West, be it Europe or be it US. That is a bit unfortunate. We are really thankful. They understood the society globally and the heterogeneity that exists. So therefore, I acknowledge wholeheartedly the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, its parameters, the measurement. Now here is another problem. The problem is that the entire this journey is based on two concepts. One is called convergence, another is called divergence. Let me explain that a bit. Now what is convergence? See, these are the two hands. So it is coming like this. The two hands are actually converging. Now divergence means these hands are moving like this. So I think all of you, those who are actually into mobiles, feeling sleepy, they can understand this is divergence, this is convergence. Now the whole exercise of comparison of developed, underdeveloped, least developed, is basically a interplay of convergence and divergence. That how far away I am on different parameters in comparison to US or Canada or Europe. And similarly, I can do the similar exercise in India also. That how much ahead Gujarat is, where West Bengal stands, where northeastern regions, they are there. And a number of parameters, be it literacy, be it education, be it health, be it income, be it infrastructure, and many more. Whatever you can think of, we can create comparatives. And if the gap increases, we tell them we are converging. And we are diverging. And if we are coming closer, we are converging. There is nothing wrong in that. Say, the highest level of literacy, maybe Kerala once upon a time achieved and gradually other states followed. That's absolutely good, nothing wrong in that. But these comparisons have some inherent limitations also. Now I am comparing Darjeeling Hills with a village in Rajasthan which is very close to the desert. And same indicators are being used. Same kind of statistical techniques are used. So the problem is that the resource endowment is completely different. The people are completely different. Their dress, food habits are completely different. I am trying to comparing them with the same kind of indicators. That is another inherent flaw of these comparisons and the word which is much being used all the time, the development. Then how we should look at that is also equally important. পরের প্রশ্ন এটা আগেও একবার বলেছি উনি Now see, the Western idea is that material well-being, I told it earlier also in other occasions, the material well-being is that more materially you are affluent, more better off you are. And black না পরে
অ্যাডভার্টাইজমেন্ট দেখাবি return to work.
Now here something we keep ponder over. Now two persons, one is Mansell Olson. He came out with a book, The Logic of Collective Action. And Elinor Ostrom in 1990, she came out with a book, Governing the Commons, The Evolution of Institutions for Collective Action. Now they are two divergent views. Now what Olson is saying that we don't want to cooperate. So you can read that rational, self-interested individuals will not act to achieve their common or group interest and prefer to resort to the free rider problem. Now what is free rider problem? Instead of writing this, tomorrow it has been announced that anyone can board the train without any ticket. None of the train in India will run or that will certainly be landed up in an accident. And same thing happened to the aeroplane, then people will sit at the rooftop of the aeroplane. So that is the free rider problem, which are the close linkages to the Hardy's argument of common property. That means as an individual, I never prefer to cooperate with the other. And just alternative position, just reverse position has been taken by Elinor Ostrom. But she told that communities can manage the resources they depend on successfully and sustainably without requiring either the state control or privatization. Now, the forest, reserve forest, or all kind of limitations, all kind of policies not to utilize the resources of any kind, natural resources. Non-renewable, absolute no. We have executed that. Some part of that true, but the dark stories are really piling up in that particular area. I'm not getting into detail of that dark story. Possibly what is happening to the Amazon forest. You can look at it. Or the way development has been initiated in the northeastern region in the name of development. For who to benefit the entire natural resources. Now almost being plundered globally, regionally, sub-regionally, that also needs to be looked at closely. But this remains very true that neither requires state intervention or privatization. We cannot think in between. That means community ownership of resources and management of resources, which the African people survive, with the Central Asian people they survive, where the entire Himalayan region people they survive, we tend to forget them or tend to ignore, or rather put them in a bracket. They are the major agent of environmental degradation. Here the biggest obstacles or observations, critical observations. So for the entire journey, that's we talk about. The journey of complete separations of environment and human society and civilization, and slowly gradual marriage and developing a love story of 17 sustainable development goals is taking place. However, we ignore this kind of teeth and kin relationships that are there in between. Okay, so we can move to the next slide. So therefore, it's the questions of cooperation and non-cooperation. So therefore, this is very widely used in general undergraduate textbook of economics. I took it from there. All of you can study, but it's very simple. The two persons got imprisonment with a condition that they cannot talk to each other. And another condition is also being imposed, that if one prisoner complained against the other, his jail term will extended to 2 years. And if both of them complain against each other, then both of them will end up with 3 years jail term. That is one principal component here, that you cannot cooperate between yourselves. Had I in a position to talk, then we would have known, had we known, we would have resolved it and come out with 1 year jail term. And if we play it for the society, we find out that most of the time the result is that we are getting 3 years jail term. That means our inherent nature is non-cooperation, which is key deterrent to the proper relationship between environment and human being. We tend to forget that if you break the natural rule of the nature, nature will retaliate and retaliate strongly. We prefer to survive with this particular proposition. Right from our daily life, the way we approach to the global society, that we remain individual, we ensure individual well-being, and we forget to basic very premises. On the one hand, Gandhiji take out, please that one, or the philosophy, Indian philosophy, the Eastern philosophy, they see that greatest good of all living beings. We have not only discarded that, but we have simply dumped that permanently. We fail to learn from them. At the same time, from the West, that is the Renaissance, the cooperative life and companionship, the two basic values that we have got inculcated. We have these own even that is part of the capitalist society, gradually got diluted. Right. So therefore, let there are 17 SDGs. This is very good. We welcome it. But if you look at the global south, things the global south has been identified by global agenda makers that they are the major creator of environmental disaster. Lot of climate change things, all those things are discussed, all these protocols, all the summit. We had a lot of heated discussion between West and all. But two important attributes, one is cooperation and one is the non-violent approach, which I told in one of the lectures here, that Gandhiji's Ahimsa, had it been practiced or understood globally for environment, we would not have required a sustainable development or sustainable development.
Exactly.
So I hope that Global South will recreate or redefine the development agenda so that the global community instead of letting us start. Thank you very much.
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ এটা আছে ওটা থাকছে আমার শেষে সিটটাকে ইউজ করতে রেজাল্ট এই সিটটাকে একটা সিটটা এগুলো সিটটা করছে রেজাল্টের সিটটা ক্রেডিট দেওয়ার করে এটা আমি করবে না সিট পে করবে